Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to our live feed update for August 20th. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and I'm here today to update you on everything that happened yesterday on the Big Brother 27 live feeds. It was day 43 in the house, and something's happening. We've got a little bit of a rumbling going on. New alliance created, some talks about the votes, some more Mickey exposing. I got a lot to talk about. And with me to talk about it all is Cory. How you doing, Cory?
I'm back, Taran. Oh my God, it's been way too long. Last we spoke, the heavy hitters reformed with Jimmy. Mickey was running the game, and Kelly is gone as long as she loses the blockbuster. So I say we just pick up from there and then move on.
What you're saying is that in your absence, things have improved.
Marginally.
All right. Well, as you know, of course, Rachel is the HOH. She nominated Mickey, Morgan, and Vince. Lauren won the veto, and after much consideration, she used it on Vince, and Rylie went up in Vince's place. The big thing that happened from there is that, of course, big drama with Keanu and Rachel breaking up, coming back together. Will they, won't they? Will the votes be there to take out Rylie now that he is super pissed off and everything? That is a huge question. And we've been talking about how basically Rylie should have roughly 5 votes locked in. He has Catherine, Keanu, Kelly, Lauren, and Vince all voting for him to stay, potentially, probably. Those are the votes that he's sort of banking on. And so we've been talking about, can Rachel get Keanu to flip to her side? That has been not working out super well so far. Then the other question is, will Vince decide to flip to that side, depending on the circumstance? Because, as we've talked about, losing Morgan is very bad for his game. And so is he willing to potentially go against what Lauren, Keanu, and Catherine and Kelly want to keep Morgan over Rylie? These are the kinds of questions we need to answer today, Cory.
Yeah, I've never been a big proponent of you'd rather the devil you know than the devil you don't know. Because if you know the devil's going after you, you should target them. But Vince, being this devil, we don't know where he's going to vote. I would be so much more scared trying to work with Vince than Keanu, who declares to Rachel over and over again, yeah, I'm keeping Rylie. I'm keeping Rylie. I'm keeping Rylie. Somehow, to me, that rings as more trustworthy than Vince's, vincing like he always does.
Yes. So, of course, there was another plot line yesterday, which was the whole, did Lauren know that Rylie was going up on the block? She admitted it to Catherine and Rylie in the night. Rylie had this very long and awkward conversation with Rachel. He retells that conversation to Keanu in the morning here. Again, in his Rylie way, that's like, yeah, I stared her down. She was like a little kid talking to me. And the reality was like, I gave my heart to you, Rachel.
Yeah, it was very melancholy stare down. And if you know anything about Rachel Rylie, she's the one who stares you down. It doesn't work the other way. But
yeah. The other thing, so there's kind of like there's one major plot line I want to follow for most of the day. So I'm gonna briefly pull one thread out because this is another, I think, important thing to mention when it comes to this vote. Because again, like I think everything that surrounded the day had to do, other than Rylie wanting a kiss, had to do with this vote. And so the other angle that we have mentioned before, when it comes to Keanu or Vince, can one of them potentially flip over? What might happen? So on and so forth. The other thing that we have mentioned is Mickey even a lock for Morgan against Rylie? Because that also matters. And Mickey does talk to Rylie today. and Catherine, and basically spends a lot of time with them, promising Rylie her vote, hoping to get Riley's vote in return. And Mickey is also a bit of a question mark because it seems fairly reasonable, at least in terms of, what we expect of Mickey, that she might actually be telling Rylie the truth, that she might actually be a vote for Rylie to stay over even Morgan.
I don't think Mickey's much of a question mark. I think Mickey will keep Rylie if given the opportunity. She had my favorite quote of the entire day where she goes, "Okay, Rylie, if you come off of the block, I'm going to vote to keep you," which doesn't make sense on like 15 different levels. But the sentiment of, "I want to keep you in the house, Rylie," was definitely there. And based on the amount she talks bad about Morgan versus Rylie, I feel like the math is actually pretty simple. And Morgan only hanging out with the Rachels, the Ashleys, the Wills of the world, I think is pushing even more in that direction for Mickey.
Mm-hmm. So that is something to pay attention to, especially as we start to talk through some numbers over the course of the day. So, but let's start the day proper, because as I mentioned, the big question is, where are these votes? And it all starts with Will and Ashley. And I feel like it was just yesterday that I was saying, Will, I really want you to do more things. And it was almost as if he heard me yesterday and started to do more things like an hour later. He's talking to Ashley and saying, I think we should be evicting Rylie under any circumstances. Like, this is what we think is the right thing to do. We are certainly learning more and more about Mickey, and we're not happy about what she's doing, but Rylie is the more pressing threat. Between Mickey and Morgan, honestly, it's not even 50-50 anymore. We're kind of just straight up leaning toward keeping Morgan. And that feels like the direction that they want to go.
Yeah, and it makes a ton of sense. I mean, I thought Morgan was kind of drawing dead this week after noms were sealed. And then she started like literally becoming a Rachel person again, becoming an Ashley person, a Will person. And all of a sudden, she has half the house voting for her to stay. So like, I was kind of skeptical of that plan, but it seems to be working out at least to some capacity. And for Will, this is absolutely a hill to die on. Rylie leaving this week skyrockets Will's position. I mean, his win equity skyrockets. He has something to put on his resume. Positionally, he's better. So, like, it's not just, okay, good Will starting to play now. I feel like this is the moment that, like, more than any other time in the season, this is when he has to play. Well, he was on the block a couple times, but other than those.
So Will does warn Ashley. Ava does seem to be leaning toward keeping Rylie. And this is the final piece that we need to talk about that is sort of surrounding all of this, is that Ava is leaning toward keeping Rylie. It's worth sort of remembering that during Ava's HOH week, she talked about how Rylie was one of the people she liked the most in the house. And while that has diminished a bit since then, and she does have deep ties and loyalty to players like Will and Rachel, she is currently in the position of leaning toward keeping Rylie. Again, you sort of have to recognize from her perspective here, she's never liked Mickey and Morgan all that much. She is particularly against Mickey now, particularly against Morgan, has been for a little while, and has no reason to dislike Rylie. Now, Ava is a vote that people like Will and potentially Rachel feel like they can get. And I think I agree with them. I think that Ava, if Will goes to Ava and actually pushes, which you would assume he would after the events of the day, and if Rachel reinforces that and Morgan is there to say, hey, I also don't like Mickey, but I think we should do this, so on and so forth, I do think they can pull Ava's vote, but it is still work to be done as of right now, today. So that is something else to be aware of at the moment. But Will and Ashley in the morning yesterday talking about Ava, worth paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel basically says, like, Ava respects you, Will. This is going to be your work, Will. And Will is perfectly capable. Does he want to? I really have no idea. But I think it's so difficult as they have these two swing votes to kind of manage in Vince and Ava. And Vince is a lot more difficult to swing. They almost are taking, like, Ava for granted, being like, yeah, we're going to have to swing Ava. That'll be annoying. We'll get there. Vince obviously requires a lot of labor to win over Vince's vote. So I think right now there's just that imbalance. If they feel better about Vince or feel like he's a lost cause, I think that's when they'll shift and like actually try to lock down Ava.
Mm-hmm. So they say, yeah, the thing about Morgan and why they're so willing to work with Morgan now is that like she's so much more valuable without Zach. But that is the thing. If we work with Morgan, we'll also need to work with Vince. Because she is so attached to Vince, but they also kind of need Vince's vote this week. So maybe that kind of works out. And Will says, well, what if we just did that? Just the four of us and maybe like we add Rachel. That's a strong 5. Us, Morgan, Vince, Rachel. We could be top 5 right there.
Welcome back, the heavy hitters. Look, I understand pulling Vince in insofar as we need him for this vote. I almost wonder, like, maybe you also just pull in Ava because you need her for this vote as well. But I've seen this conversation 1,000 times, Taran. It's Vince and Rachel being like, all right, we did it. We're working together now. And then we fast forward a week. So I like the idea of including him because you need to give him a reason to vote out Rylie. But beyond that, like, I don't know. I wasn't sold on this as much as seemingly Will and Ashley were.
Yeah, I mean, long term, this isn't like necessarily a winning end game for Will and Ashley, right? Like if this was their actual final 5, I don't love it for them. But it is what they need right now. And like the thing is that for players like Will and Ashley who have been at the bottom, who have been disregarded and have a long shot of winning the game in the first place, this is the first step towards something, right? And being a part of an alliance that you can then eventually betray if you need to is, you need to have the alliance in order to make the move to get rid of the alliance at some point. So it's an interesting idea, but here's the thing also, again, for as much as they talk, these are not exactly players that have taken a lot of initiative so far. Except yesterday, they did very quickly. They split up. Ashley went and talked to Rachel about votes while Will went to talk to Morgan about the situation. And so Ashley's talking to Rachel upstairs and talking about, we need to get out Rylie. And Rachel's like, yeah, you're telling me that's what I've wanted, obviously. And Ashley's, but I don't know that we have the votes. And Rachel's like, I know. This is a problem. And starting to like pitch a potential solution while Will is talking to Morgan about like, hey, obviously we are thinking about wanting to keep you now. We're concerned about having the votes. Obviously, Rylie is the biggest threat. How do you feel Vince would feel about potentially working with us, maybe creating something? What do you think about this? And Morgan's like, of course he'd be down because she believes in Vince way too much. Like Vince, yeah, absolutely. Vince would be with us 100%. So then they take these two pairings. Will brings Morgan upstairs and they bring the 4 of them together and they start talking about votes to take out Rylie. Does this make sense? Does this work? And Morgan's like, I do. I have Vince. I'm telling you, I have Vince. Honestly, says Morgan, it's Mickey I'm concerned about. She's been talking to Rylie. She's been chatting him up all day. And this opens the floodgates for like the rest of the day. And anytime I'm talking about anything else that's been talked about, they're also talking about Mickey and how much they are annoyed by her and like finding a new note to compare about Mickey.
The entire time. And now my question to you, Taran, is this Morgan desperation campaigning? She'll say yes to anything, or is this the direction she actually wants to head after this eviction?
I believe it is the direction she wants to head for now. I don't think she has like completely turned the corner on Rachel. But I do think that, and she's been saying this for a while, Rachel is not her immediate problem. Now, Now, if Rylie leaves, she could change her mind. But she has bigger issues, right? Rylie is an issue. Catherine, Keanu, Kelly, these are problems for her. I think she's happy to work with these people for now, and then eventually, potentially, turn. And I do believe, trusts Rachel more than Mickey at the moment. Yeah. Because they talk this through, and they start again comparing notes about Mickey, significantly so. Did Mickey tell you this? Did you believe this? Rachel saying, yeah, well, Mickey told me you were coming after me, and then you confirmed it. And Mickey's like, well, yeah, or Morgan's like, but she was also coming after you. Like, yeah. Conveniently, she left that part out. And Morgan's asking little things like, did you not want to meet with me one time? And Rachel's like, what? Of course I would want to have met with you. Like, what does that even mean? And just more and more and more and more, just constant, like every little bit of Mickey's game, every little thing that we have been watching, like they are pinpointing and picking out and going, oh my God, she's doing this, she's doing that. This builds into, guys, we really should work together. We should make an alliance.
Yeah, and it feels like all of this is so contingent on, okay, if the vote is Morgan versus Rylie, right? Like that's what all these like vote calculations are for. In all likelihood, Mickey is going to go home on Thursday, and we'll have the continuation of this story for weeks to come, because Rylie's still going to be there, Morgan's still going to be there, Vince is still going to be in the middle, and we'll keep moving. But it is very interesting. Like this collection of people, what always worries me is like, you can't bring someone in without their baggage. Bringing Vince in without his baggage of like Lauren and low-key Keanu is kind of difficult. Bringing in Will without Ava is difficult. So like the foundations of this group that is forming has so many cracks in it, where the question for me is like, not will one of the cracks open? It's like, how many of them and how disastrous will that be?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like the Bond alliance.
I think it's a little worse than the Bond, because there's been so many weeks of betrayal since the Bond built within this group. But, look, I'm more than happy to be wrong about this. This would be very fun.
Well, they go and find Vince, who's busy talking to Keanu. And Will pulls Vince up into the HOH room, and they basically extend the invitation to the Mickey exposed party to Vince. Morgan, has finally dropped the bomb about like, Vince, I had to cry to Mickey to get her to not put you on the block during the Jimmy eviction week. And now Vince is running around. And now apparently even Mickey was trying to put me up on the block. Like, I didn't even know that. Like, everyone is so mad at me all the time. And so Rachel turns the topic to Rylie and talks about why he needs to go. And Vince agrees. He's like, I certainly can see that this is potentially one of the only times Rylie is going to see the block. And Rachel says, no, it goes beyond that. Like, a showmance is always going to stick together. They're always going to choose each other. They're going to become more and more powerful as the game goes on. The two votes become more powerful. They're two people who are both good at competitions. They have double the chance to win a competition. And then once they make the jury, they're at best 2 votes in the jury who are always going to vote together. Like when I was in the jury, I just did what Brendan wanted. And then at worst, one of them is in there campaigning for the other one. I would not have won and shouldn't have won Big Brother 13 without Brendan being on the jury campaigning for me to win. And Vince is like, wow, I never even thought about that.
I love Rachel's whole anti-showman's campaign, because it's been kind of puzzling this whole week. Why would she put up Rylie? It felt so out there. It felt like such a bad move to me. Then I started thinking about Rachel's seasons. This is like exactly where her and Brendan are split up every time.
Yeah.
Is like the very early jury, final 11, 10, 9 spot. So I think Rachel just hit the spot, was HOH, saw a showmance, and was like, well, this is how it works. Rylie has to go. This is where Brendan goes, and maybe he'll come back due to America's vote. Like, I just think that opens up so many It really opened my eyes to what Rachel is doing, because when she lists all her reasoning, it's almost like transporting back 12, 15 years to how other people were talking about Brendan and Rachel in that moment. So like, she's got the talking points ready. The question is, and I know you have a perspective on this, I genuinely don't know if it's the right move for Vince. Like, I think there's so many pros and cons on both sides where like, it really will come down to just what his gut tells him, and or if he folds to pressure from either side.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think we can talk about it. I mean, so basically Vince says, those are great points. They start counting votes. They realize they would need Ava and maybe even somebody like Lauren if they don't have Mickey. They talk about the potential of pulling Keanu as well, but they recognize how stubborn he might be. They mention like let's make this an official alliance, and Morgan suggests the name The Judges as the alliance name, as they will be, deciding who goes home. They are making the judgment. And so the Judges Alliance is formed. It is Rachel, Morgan, Vince, Will, and Ashley. And this is exactly the alliance that Will was, talking with Ashley about in the morning, about wanting to create. And just like that, it's already made.
America and I like almost simultaneously said, well, first of all, America said, oh, Vince is going to rat this out to Lauren. At the same time, I said, oh, Rachel's going to rat this out to Keanu. And none of that really happens. So we're good so far. They did toss out the joke alliance name of The Jury, I think because of what everyone says to Rachel all the time, which I thought was pretty funny. But look, an alliance of 5 where people previously were targeting each other benefits everyone in it if everyone sticks to it. We will see. I mean, if Vince is going to vote with this group, I think it makes a ton of sense to actually stick with the Judges, at least for the time being. It's just, is that even what Vince wants to do? We won't find out probably for a while.
Right. So let's talk about this for Vince. I brought this up yesterday. I said, I do think that it is in Vince's interest to make sure Morgan stays as his primary focus this week. Because if he were to vote out Morgan over Rylie, Morgan leaves and he joins the Kelly Alliance, which is, Rylie, Catherine, Lauren, Vince, Kelly. We'll talk about this soon, but Kelly wants to include Ava in this now. And that's actually just like not a great place for him, especially because if Morgan leaves, that alliance will also likely include Mickey now. And Mickey obsessed with Rylie. Catherine, obviously in a showmance with Rylie. Like Rylie and Catherine are in the driver's seat of that. And Vince is really like at the bottom of it. He is surrounded by people who prioritize Rylie over him, including somebody like even Keanu, even Kelly. They all prioritize Rylie over him. And it puts him in what I think is a very difficult sort of like end game position, especially because he will have needed to have burned all of the people in the Judges in order to make this happen, and will have a really, really difficult time finding numbers in them moving forward. So like that feels not super tenable. If he manages to just vote out, say, Mickey, that's sort of, I think, what he thinks is, and what I would assume is probably the ideal scenario, or at least one of them, where you take out Mickey. That's removing a number that you don't really have. You are able to appease the Rylie, Keanu side of the house while still potentially being like, hey, I didn't go against Morgan. You still, at the very least, you keep Morgan, hopefully. And maybe you're able to appease some of the Rachel, Will, Ashley, whatever as well. Maybe you don't, but that's not that important. They've got bigger problems to deal with, hopefully. And then there's the side of just actually voting out Rylie in any scenario, sticking with the judges. I think in order to do that, you need to make sure that Lauren is on board with you doing that. You need to make sure that Keanu is relatively on board with you doing that. And that can work. If you can get both of them to be on board, then you only have Catherine and Kelly mad at you. And in the meantime, you take out a huge threat and you maintain a very solid position with a lot of different people. And the judges feel like they can trust you, which they can't. And that's kind of, again, like sort of, I think, for me at least, the ideal path. I do personally not think that voting out Rylie over Morgan is something that Vince should do. I think he has plenty of good options outside of that. It's just a matter of how much is he willing to go out on a limb? How much is he willing to push? And those are questions that have plagued Vince all season.
Yeah, so this is one of those rare scenarios where I kind of fully disagree, Taran. I just think, especially for a player like Vince, who, say what you will about this cast, he's one of the more competent players here, clearly. And the other competent players, in my opinion, are kind of on the judge's side. If he gets rid of Morgan here, let's say Rylie and Mickey stay, he does have the problems of Rachel and Will and Ashley, and those were always problems for him. He's already been nominated by 2 of them. But if he gets into that end game with Keanu and Kelly and Lauren and Catherine and Rylie and all these people, yes, positionally, not looking great. Him and Lauren are also the 2 most competent, best players in that group by a mile. It seems like Rylie doesn't have the drive to actually win the game. Keanu and Kelly are wild cards, but they've kind of been wild cards that consistently talk bad about Vince, but end up being with Vince at the end of the day, and the showmans will be such a big target. I just like the world where Vince is surrounded by players much worse than him, and the next best player is his final 2. I totally hear you. Like, he's no one's number 1. It looks bad. I just think he'll be able to figure it out, which isn't great analysis, but it's just what I see.
Yeah, I definitely fully disagree with that. I mean, we've seen Keanu. He is obsessed with Rylie. And he has been so adamantly against looking at Rylie. He has looked at Vince plenty. And the problem is that, like, Vince is one of the worst competitors in that group. Yeah. And that's a huge problem. And like, I really do feel like Keanu will stick with Rylie over Vince. I feel like Lauren is not really the next best. Like, Lauren is a fine player, I guess, but she is not somebody capable of like influencing or pushing anything, and will not be. I mean, she crumbled about the lie about did she know if Rylie was on the block, would be going up on the block. I just feel like he quickly finds himself again, because even like all of those people, I think, would prioritize Lauren over Rylie, over Vince, and I think want Vince out relatively. Like, even somebody like Rylie kind of barely tolerates Vince at times. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you doing asking me for permission to ask about using the veto? Like, Rylie, I just do not think is in a spot. Like, maybe there's a world where Rylie takes out Keanu and Kelly first. I could see that potentially happening. But I just don't see the world where I'm Vince. Like, because if I'm Vince, there's no world where I want to be in an end game with Rylie and Keanu and Catherine, who have all won competitions, and I haven't. I've like won an HOH against 3 people. Like, that's just such a terrifying prospect for me, and especially to willingly give up one of my best pieces on the board, which is Morgan. That's the big thing. Obviously, like, I don't think that end game is like untenable, but I don't think it's desirable, especially if I need to sacrifice Morgan for it, where Morgan is basically like a minion of mine, will do my bidding, will win comps for me, and is somebody that like maintains some kind of sides pressure, is vouching for me with other people. Morgan is just so valuable to him.
I mean, it falls into his lap if Mickey gets evicted. If Mickey gets evicted here, Vince is doing so well. And I think the thing we can agree on is if he's able to go with the judges and keep Lauren, Keanu, not piss off the other side as much, of course, he's golden. My concern, though, is if he just goes with the judges here and flips on what have been most of his allies, even if they're kind of loose allies, he's probably going to be nominated by the Rachel side still sooner rather than later, because at the end of the day, the only eligible nominees would be like Catherine, Keanu, Kelly, and then Mickey, I guess, would still be there. And then Vince is probably a replacement nom. Like, I just don't find any short-term security in the Rachel side, maybe 1 week of safety before it's back to Rachel versus Vince again. And now Vince has lost the loyalty of, Catherine or Rylie, whoever's left.
I think my thing is that, like, if Vince were comfortable going to the end game with those people, then he should also be comfortable and capable of pulling Keanu and Lauren with him in this move, right? Like, like if he's not capable of pulling Keanu and Lauren and these people with him to make the move to take out Rylie over Morgan, then he's in a spot where he probably shouldn't trust himself to go to the end game with those people who he's not capable of pulling with him on this vote, right?
That makes sense. I think Vince has had, and this is a very weak argument, but Vince has kind of had the privilege of things just working out this season, where he nominates Kelly and then Kelly luckily stays, and then Adrian needs to go and Vince is not pushing for it, but it happens anyways, and Lauren gets pulled for the veto and takes him off the block. Like, I'm not going to say, Vince should rely on luck. That is not a strategy. However, I think Vince has shown like a certain fluidity, and that is because he's a rat. He's a snake. He can just kind of move where the wind takes him. We're like, I trust a player like that to figure things out down the line more than right now staking his name on, if I can't convince Lauren and Keanu, my game shifts dramatically one way or the other. I think maybe it's just misplaced faith in Vince, but, also there is a logic of just being a former player. Short-term concerns are a bigger deal than long-term concerns, and then the long-term concerns bite you in the butt. But the short-term concerns bite you in the butt earlier. So, like, my math is the end game looks rough, figure it out a little later, as opposed to maybe being nominated next week. But I digress. That's kind of the disagreement.
Yeah. Well, the judges are made. Vince talks with Will after this, and Will continues to try to sell Vince on the alliance. Just great sort of like aftercare, so to speak, like not just making the alliance and then like go off, but very much Will continuing to sell Vince on it, talking about working together, talking about making something happen between these two, and within the larger group as well. And then Rachel, in the meantime, already goes back to Keanu to try to work on him here with some of the voting situations, but also just trying to sort of continue to repair their bond. So Rachel basically is like, okay, I've come up with this great like argument against the showmance. Now I'm gonna hit Keanu with it. Like, this really seems to work with Vince. Like, let me give this one to Keanu and see if it lands. And so she does the same. She says the same thing about like showmances are dangerous. They're votes for each other in the jury. They campaign for each other. And Keanu's like, yeah, but not this week.
Well, Keanu's hilarious in this conversation. Keanu goes, Rachel, I thought about it and I figured out why you put up Rylie. Rachel's like, oh, I'd love to hear this. Why did I put up Rylie? Keanu's like, well, the group I was describing, if you and I got to the final two, they would all vote for me to win over you. And I'm sure for you want to win. So that wouldn't work for you. Rachel's like, I have not considered that 1 ounce in my decision-making process, Keanu. I have not weighed jury votes for a single moment. And then goes on her spiel. I think the Keanu-Rachel relationship is actually pretty simple these days. They both view each other the exact same. They both think the other one means well and probably has their back, won't target the other one. However, they are totally unreliable and delusional and have bad information, and you can't trust them with anything. So we're just kind of at a stalemate. Keanu doesn't want to hear it. And, I don't think Rachel can feel like she can rely on his vote. Maybe if Vince pushes along with her, but I think Rylie is the one who has to push to be evicted for Keanu to care.
Well, they have this conversation. It's pretty similar. It's more of Keanu being like, I really like Rachel. I'm never going to put you up. It's definitely harder now to work with you though, after what you did. and so on and so forth. And after this conversation, he goes to Rylie and he tells him about it and how Rachel is still trying to get Rylie out. So he is, I would say, drifting further away from Rachel. Would he actually put her up at this point? I don't think so. I think he still has bigger fish to fry. But he is, if they were drifting closer and closer together, they are now drifting further and further apart for sure. Morgan asks Vince about this alliance as well. And basically is like, what do you think? Because I think it's a pretty good idea. Obviously, Rachel is still a problem, but she's a problem that we can deal with later. And we should have the ability to do so moving forward if we're able to sort of survive this vote and take out Rylie.
Yeah, and this, for me, was very informative because it shows where Morgan really stands in my eyes. The question I asked you earlier, I think Morgan does want to ride with this crew, even if this crew is also the only way for her surviving the vote. So again, it kind of still raises those questions. Mm-hmm. But Vince is always going to give his same answer, regardless of what he thinks. So it's still hard to gauge where he's at. I think once we get a full, long, lengthy conversation between Vince and Lauren, then we can start analyzing exactly where Vince feels about the judges.
Mm-hmm. So Vince does have a long conversation with Ava. Ava talks to Rachel about Vince and how annoyed she was with Vince the day before with his holding meetings after coming off the block. And then she has a conversation with Vince. And it's, again, a very long conversation. And it's a lot of Vince doing his Vince thing. Oh, man, I just suck, and sometimes I just end up talking to people and it looks like a certain thing. And this is where he's like, apparently everybody thinks that I do this. Apparently I was going to be nominated by Mickey. And they talk about Mickey and they talk about life and they talk about how they're losers and all this stuff. Oh, that's awkward. People really need to stick together. And Ava admits, I was really annoyed with you, with you doing all of that. And Vince apologizes and they kind of they clear the air a bit. And it seems like for the most part, it kind of works.
Vince's or Ava's rather complaining about Vince having all these one-on-ones post veto meeting felt like such projection to me, because Ava's you're supposed to make your nominations and then go to the room for the next 4 days. You're not, we finished the ceremony, Vince. But it is funny seeing Vince put on this act that he puts on very often. There was a segment on the episodes about it. And it pisses Ava off, at least in the past. She's talked so much about, oh, I'm the victim, I got pulled off the block. And he was doing a little bit of that. So this conversation goes well. It seems like they bond. It was very long. It feels like they made some progress. But what Vince was doing was also what Ava was previously complaining about. So I wouldn't be surprised if today we see Ava talking to Will being like, Vinny the lip again, talking about his anxiety. We're all anxious, Vince, something like that.
Mm-hmm. So interesting to note again where Ava falls in all of this. Vince talks to Kelly after this, and Kelly's like, "So did you get her to keep Rylie?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course, she's down to keep Rylie." And she's like, "Oh yeah, that's what I was hoping. We should have Ava in our alliance instead of Keanu. We should pull Ava into our 6." It's like, oh yeah, maybe.
Who knows about the 6? Do Rylie and Catherine know this is happening?
Kelly did pitch it to them, but I don't think they take it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, this would be a really fun conversation postseason. Kelly's 6 versus Keanu's 10 from week 2. Which one is more real and more powerful? The answer, neither of them. But Kelly's trying to do her thing, and it's funny because I feel like we end up talking so much about specific players and their end games. Kelly's end game is probably Keanu has to be in the final 2 against her, and then she loses unanimously. Is Kelly the only player in this game truly drawing dead? Maybe. I
mean, Kelly is the bottle of ketchup from Big Brother 14. Genuine. She's being used as the when people talk about who would I would vote for this person. I would never vote for this person unless they're against Kelly. Or I would never vote for this person even if they were against Kelly. She is just the de facto example for I wouldn't vote for that person in the jury, or she is the least likely person to be voted for in a jury.
All right, well, here's my my crazy idea. I think Kelly should start volunteering for the block again. I think that's where her social standing wasn't the highest, but her respect levels were the highest when she was winning blockbusters and winning vetoes to save herself. Actually, I think it was just blockbusters. But like, if Kelly can just like comp her way to the end in like a Cameron or a Frank way, that is the path to winning more than any form of like good Big Brother play.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, winning comps is always the best jury management. So
Get
you
on
know.
it. She should be on the block this week. I get why she's mad at Rachel.
So Vince does talk to Lauren, but only briefly. But it's fairly telling, I would say, in terms of where he seems to be leaning. He tells her, listen, I'm still evicting Mickey no matter what. So that part of the judges alliance does not seem to be sticking.
Yeah.
However, he says, between Morgan and Rylie, we have some things to consider. If I vote Morgan out, you and I will be seen as a pair for sure, and we'll be put up on the block together. And this is a problem, right? And he's like, again, he's starting to sort of like make the case to Lauren, starting to do the thing that I'm talking about, which is make sure Lauren is on board with the idea that we shouldn't vote to evict Morgan, and trying to convince her of this. They get interrupted. So we do not see the rest of this conversation. But again, I do think that this is an indication that Vince is likely thinking along the same lines that I was outlining earlier, that he does not want to take Morgan out of the game. Morgan is too valuable for him. You know, Rylie has never been an actual number of his. He's never convinced Rylie of anything. And so keeping Rylie in the game when he has all of these people, in order to like, in having to sacrifice Morgan to do so, it seems like he's just not willing or hoping to go in that direction.
Yeah, and the case for Vince is there. It's been thoroughly outlined on this podcast. Now, what about Lauren? Does this make sense for her? Because from my perspective, it makes a lot less sense for Lauren than it does for Vince. And if I'm Lauren, I might be like, Vince, if you want to keep Morgan, I get that. I have to stay on this side of the vote to not create all these enemies.
Certainly. I mean, it makes no sense for Lauren to flip her vote. Although if the votes aren't there, then maybe it does.
Yeah.
But obviously this is not good for Lauren. That if Rylie leaves, where does that leave Lauren? It leaves her holding the bag full of Kelly and Catherine. And Keanu, maybe? Like, it's bad. It's bad for Lauren. But, you know, not necessarily like immediate short-term bad. And again, given it basically just makes her even more reliant on Vince again, because now Vince is the person with connections on the other side. And she will require Vince to make a turn on the judges at some point with Morgan and, you know, pull Morgan in and all kinds of other stuff. The Rylie and Catherine route was her route. It was a solid path for her. She's in a better position than Vince in that spot. Because she can win competitions, especially mental ones, toward the end of the game, against the likes of, you know, Rylie. Like that's where she could potentially manage to take him out. And she's got that connection to Kelly as well. It's still not like ideal. Again, you never want to bring a showmance that's capable of winning comps toward the end game. We saw that play out with Jackson and Holly in season 21, but that path makes more sense for Lauren, and if it doesn't happen, she doesn't even get the benefit of having been included in a new alliance to make that path not happen. So obviously, she should not want this.
Yeah,
but this is Lauren we're talking about, and she has kind of conceded to a lot of things in the past. So I'm curious to see what happens here with her response. She should push back against this hard, and given Vince's style of gameplay, if she pushes back hard, I think he might back down, which would be good for her.
Yeah. But knowing Lauren's style of game, like it just kind of goes round and round. Here's the thing, though: if Rylie ends up going home, Lauren's on the wrong side of the vote, so voting to keep Rylie. I actually don't hate that position for her because she does have kind of unique connections to Kelly and Catherine that other people in the house just don't have, and those are both people who I think she survives the block against, and they're both people who she wins in the end against. So, like, I think there is very clearly a path there. Rachel can't play in the next HOH. That tilts the odds in her favor even more. Like, I think she has a lot of room to maneuver if Rylie leaves because Riley's gobbling up so much win equity on that side of the house. And I think most of that win equity goes to like her and Vince as opposed to Catherine, Kelly, and, Keanu. Throw them in there.
Yeah, I do. Like I said, I don't think it's devastating. I do think there's a path here. And it does require sort of leaning on, she does have a great connection to Ava. And so if she's able to pull Ava also super well connected to Catherine at this point in terms of like just a personal relationship. There's a world where I think that like Lauren can really start to pull them in. And if Will and Ashley are thinking in any kind of, smart capacity, obviously they are all always looking at Rachel with a side eye and would probably love to sneak into some kind of like Catherine, Lauren, Kelly group because that is much better for them in the end game than like Rachel, Morgan. So and Vince, but obviously Vince is gonna be connected to Lauren. But like, again, there are paths here for sure. It's just not necessarily, I think, the path that Lauren was looking at. And so and it is a little more tenuous as well, especially in the short term for, I think, specifically Lauren. But interesting stuff either way. I'm very curious to see what Lauren's response is. I'm very curious to see where Vince actually falls because there is still a little bit more to talk about here, which is that the conversation with Vince and Lauren got interrupted because Rachel wanted to hang out. And they hung out. They just like actually hung out. And for genuinely the first time in 43 days, they seem to be enjoying each other's company.
It was shocking. And the entire time I'm just waiting for Vince to pipe up and be like, you see, Rachel, this is what I wanted the whole season. Just you and me being able to talk. Like it felt ripe for that quote. We didn't get it, at least in that way. So
the problem is he said that too many times.
Yeah, like, I mean, he literally said it in the second heavy hitters iteration. And then in this, the judges, he actually had an aside in that judges meeting with Rachel and went, see, Rachel, like, this is what we've been working towards the whole time. And then like they had to break and then go back into the group conversation. But if they have the capacity to get along, because again, Vince is probably one of the only people who doesn't know Rachel's game, but knows Big Brother kind of as much as Rachel, or at least the next most. Like, there's a foundation to work from there. Okay, let me back up a little bit. I think it's hard for Rachel because the reason why she's a great TV character is why she sometimes has trouble as a player. Because we saw her talk to Lauren and say, well, Lauren, I guess I'm targeting you now. And obviously she's nominated Vince, said that to him so many times. So even though there's good social stuff happening, there's so many like strategic barriers I think all three of these people need to get over to actually do something real. But this is a good start. I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like the thing about Vince is that you can manipulate Vince through pressure. And the more people you have that would be mad at him for not doing what you wanted him to do, the more pressured he will be to go in that direction. And so, the more you spend time with him and have a good time and bond, the more sort of betrayed those people would theoretically feel if Vince didn't go along with them, which means the less likely Vince would do that. And you can already see that starting to work in the way that Vince is starting to like slowly break the news to Lauren a little bit, like, well, what if we didn't go in this direction? And so again, it's a matter of like, will we see any pushback on that? And again, that's where like Rylie and Catherine don't have as much pull for Vince because they don't really hang out with Vince. He really, for as much as like he could theoretically be included on that quote unquote side, it's a mess of a side. And he doesn't actually have the social bonds with the two most powerful people on that side, Rylie and Catherine. They don't have any kind of social pull there. They don't have any kind of like, well, we would be so pissed at you, Vince, if you betrayed us. It's mostly just his connection through Lauren. And so if he's able to sort of diffuse Lauren, there's not nearly as much fear of pushback there than fear of pushback on the other side. And so that's where like the idea that he really could be going in this direction could make some sense. And then you can start thinking about, again, like, does that extend all the way to a Mickey vote as well? Given that he told Lauren, I'm definitely voting Mickey out. That would also be considered a little bit of a betrayal in this group, but less so. So will they be able to get him to go that far is another question. He's hanging out with Rachel. He's hanging out with Rachel, Morgan, Ashley. They're joking around. They're laying out the sides, like full on straight out. Like, yeah, there's a side now. It's Rylie, Catherine, like Lauren and Kelly and Keanu. Like that's that side, Vince. And then there's our side. And you're with us, dude. And so there's a lot of that going on. There's more of just Vince and Rachel. They're talking about video games. They're hanging out. Like, again, this is going late into the night, and it does feel like there's some genuine sort of bonding happening.
Yeah, which is interesting. The most likely outcome, again, we're not talking about it much because it's the least interesting outcome, is just Mickey doesn't win the blockbuster and goes home. In which case, I honestly expect Rachel to take that as, oh, Vince was BSing us the whole time.
Right.
Like
that's the thing.
So it's like, I genuinely think Vince is buying into this more than Rachel believes. If it ends up being Morgan versus Rylie, we might get to see that evidenced. But if Mickey goes home, Vince can't then go to Rachel and be like, well, if it was Morgan and Rylie, obviously I would have been with you guys. I just don't think Rachel's going to have it. And I think we're going to have like part 7 of Rachel feeling betrayed by Vince and targeting him. But again, like you have to account for all 3 outcomes. Everyone could win the blockbuster. So that's what they're doing.
Well, and this is the thing. The vote with Mickey is actually theoretically more dependent on Vince. So this is sort of the day, right? The Judges Alliance forms. They've theoretically pulled Vince's vote, Vince being a potential swing vote. But I brought up the 2 points at the start of this podcast for a reason. Because for as much as we're talking about what will Vince do, it might not matter. Because if Mickey doesn't vote for Morgan to stay over Rylie, it doesn't matter if Vince flips his vote because Mickey has already flipped her vote and they still don't have the votes. Even if they did have Ava, which they don't seemingly at the moment. So right now, if they don't have Mickey and they don't have Ava and they barely have Vince, they're still quite a ways off of keeping Morgan over Rylie. They need to pull Ava. They should be able to, but it's not a given. Then they still need to make sure they have Vince, which is not a given. And even then, they don't have the votes without Mickey. And if they don't have Mickey, that's it, which means they would need to pull somebody like Lauren as well, or make sure they have Mickey. It's, again, still quite a ways off. And then with the Mickey versus Rylie vote, they may not have Vince. They would have Morgan, obviously, because Morgan wouldn't be on the block, but they might not have Vince, and they still, again, don't for sure have Ava yet. So there's a lot of work to be done here, and there is only 1 day left before the eviction tomorrow. And wouldn't you know it, it's day 44.
Uh-oh. I don't like day 44. I think Lauren is the vote to get. And I think there's a lot of reasons why you think you can get Lauren. First of all, you have Vince campaigning to her. That helps a lot. But also, I think Lauren, I have a lot of respect for Lauren, not in how she made the move, but her using the veto on Vince against Rachel's pressure based on their 2 personality types. I would have expected Lauren to fold in that spot. She didn't. That's great. However, Lauren's still probably very concerned that now she's made an enemy out of Rachel and everything that entails. Maybe Ashley will, people like that. So if Vince can spin this as like, look, you're now having your cake and eating it too. You got to take me off the block and get Rachel's protection and be with these people and still be good with the other side and all these things. I think that is the pitch, if I'm Lauren, that I would be willing to hear more so than like, Morgan's better for our game, Lauren, because if Lauren has any reading of social situations, she probably knows Morgan isn't her best friend.
It's tough. I mean, I think that it's possible to get Lauren to be okay with Vince voting the other way. I think it's possible to get her there. I don't know that it's possible to get her to actually vote that way. For her to cast a vote against Rylie and be the swing vote to make that happen, she's burning Catherine, one of her best allies. She's burning Kelly, which is not a great ally, but somebody that she has a working relationship with. She's burning Rylie, an asset for her in the game, at least in her mind right now. And she's doing so for what? She wasn't included in this alliance. An offer of protection from Rachel, maybe, like that happened day before the vote after being told that she couldn't work with her after using the veto. Like, there's just a lot going on here, and a lot would have to happen for Lauren to, I think, even consider voting in that direction. And it just feels pretty difficult to get there, especially just in one day. For Lauren to be the swing vote to go there. You know, maybe you say, hey, Lauren, the reason we need your vote is because Mickey flipped to keep Rylie, because now Mickey wants to work with Rylie, and you don't want to be in an alliance, against the rest of the house with Mickey and Rylie and Keanu and Kelly. But again, in just one day, it feels like it's a tough sell. It's a tough sell for Lauren to be that vote, because it does, like, I think you can convince her it's okay to let Rylie go, maybe, but for her to burn her game to do it just feels like a really tough sell.
If she just was comfortable lying, you could just say blame Keanu on the vote flip or blame Kelly. And I think that actually works a little bit better for her. But the pitch to Lauren would be one of fear. You have to scare her. Be like,
she would buckle in a second.
100%.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way she feels comfortable blaming the vote.
It would work is the thing, though. Like, we talked about it with Adrian so long ago, where it was like, you bank up all these integrity points. Everyone thinks you always tell the truth. And Lauren, for as much as she lied yesterday, she still ended up telling the truth like an hour later. So, like, she still has that reputation, if only she had any interest in weaponizing it. But again, like, if you convince Lauren, it's not because it's strategically best for Lauren's game or you convinced her as such. You basically said, yeah, Lauren, maybe the wall's coming up and Ashley or Morgan are going to be really good, and I want to make sure you're protected. And then she gets scared and keeps them.
Mm-hmm. I think you're honestly actually slightly more likely to pull Keanu here. If Vince backed up what Rachel was saying about Rylie, I do think, because it's coming from a man, and also that it's being backed up by somebody that's not a woman, that he might actually believe it. But I don't think Vince is daring enough to do so. I think that he fears that if it doesn't work, then now he's burned Rylie and potentially Keanu, and they still don't have the votes to take out Rylie. I don't think there's any chance he would do that. So I don't see Keanu flipping. I really don't know that I see Lauren flipping, which means it may just come down to Mickey. And that's not looking great for Morgan.
Well, so here's the thing. Here's what confuses me. So in the judges meeting, they had this whole discussion about Keanu, and like everyone kind of understands that Rylie doesn't like Keanu. Everyone except Keanu. So why doesn't Rachel have any backup? I understand Vince, but someone like Ashley is kind of a caution at the wind person. Morgan, like, why don't these people, who I know Keanu won't take them as seriously for a lot of reasons, but like, I assume it would start to build up and like meaningfully do something to Keanu.
I mean, Rachel told him, like, everyone knows, and he said, who? Like, Morgan and Ashley and Will and Ava. Like, obviously, I'm not going to believe any of them. And so,
yeah, so it has to be
he has
Vince,
sort of insulated himself to the truth.
Yeah, no one's like Keanu. He's different.
Truly. All right. Well, anything else we should mention before we? Of course. Should we talk about Rylie and Catherine?
I mean, so I believe if Rylie gets evicted this week, it will be really bad for Catherine's game. and it's what Catherine should be hoping for. So,
yeah,
that's my perspective.
They got into a fight. Listen, we don't need to go too deep. It's really just like every other day it's this stuff. But they got into a fight because Rylie was talking about how like, oh, Catherine, you're gonna leave me. And she was like, what do you even mean? That's not what I meant. That's not what I'm saying. They have this whole thing. She's like, don't say things like that. I don't like when you joke like that. He eventually comes around to saying like, I'm sorry, come give me a kiss. And she's like, no. He's like, you never kiss me. And then he turns it around on her and is acting like he's like, oh, I'm always trying to love up on you and you don't let me. And she's like, Rylie, like sometimes I don't feel comfortable. And he of course doesn't respect those boundaries and says things like, you're not going to get rid of me. You're stuck in here with me, so on and so forth. And it's like, okay, well, you know.
It was to the point where like I was talking to America. I'm like, what should production even do? Because I think they should just eject him. If anyone feels, and look, here the weird part of it is how uncomfortable does Catherine feel? It certainly feels uncomfortable to watch. But if production, like, you can't warn Rylie really, because I think that would set Rylie off. But you have to obviously stop this behavior. I guess you just kind of do wellness checks with Catherine. But that's weird in its own way, because then what would Catherine think is happening on the outside? Like, there's just a lot of weirdness and murkiness in this whole situation. There was a weird part of the conversation where, like, Rylie asks for a kiss. Catherine says no. Rylie then raises the stakes and says, I'm going to marry you, which I thought was a
You're going to
crazy
marry
thing.
me whether you like it or not.
It reminded me of, like, a kid who's, like, selling lemonade. It's like, $5 lemonade. You're like, that's way too much. I'm not paying $5. They're like, okay, how about $1 million? You're like, okay, fine, the $5. Like, it feels like that's what Riley's trying to do. And it's uncomfortable to watch. And again, I asked the question, like, what should production do? Because going nuclear is what I would do, but it's a tough spot. Like, I don't know.
I mean, there's a winner of the show who was pretty similar to this in a different way, but definitely like had some pretty nasty interactions with his showmans. Again, going back to Jackson and Holly, and he won the show. So
so I know what they will do. That's an easy answer. Nothing.
Listen, at the end of the day, they like for as much as there's been discourse about like will they eject him? Should they eject him? They cast him, and they have portrayed him to be a lovable, cute showmance in a showmance with Catherine. Like, it's pretty clear where production stands on this so far. The thing for me is, at the very, very least right now, I think it is a responsibility of theirs to not actively hide and obfuscate and sort of like fabricate things that are not existing. Like they need to be showing this. This is a huge part of their relationship. They are like this more than they are cutesy ever. And for production to act like they are only cutesy is incredibly irresponsible. And it is, the floor here should be portraying this to be what it is.
Yeah, of course. And I will say, like, I think on a normal season, I think Rylie would be the front runner for America's favorite player, and having the edit to. And if he won more competitions, I think he'd be right in that position, today. So there's a world where Rylie stays this week, starts racking up an HOH win, goes after Rachel. Like, there is a path for a Rylie AFP, if not a Rylie win. Maybe I think both seems unlikely, but we have enough data at this point to understand where production is going to go with this.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, anything else to bring up, Cory?
Just one last thing. I'm talking about Mickey like she's gone. What happens if Mickey stays? Where does she go?
I think she goes to Rylie and Catherine.
Which is so funny. Like, why? But I think at that point, I would imagine Rylie and Catherine would be willing to accept Mickey back. But is there a world where Rylie and Mickey... Because can Mickey stay against Morgan? That seems like a pretty tough...
Mickey likely does not stay against Morgan. But again, the Rylie versus Morgan, with Mickey voting to keep Rylie, means that Morgan potentially leaves. I think Mickey goes straight to Rylie and Catherine, and just further, like, they just further accumulate that power, right? Like, and which is again why I think that, like, that is just not where I'd want to be if I were Vince, because that's another person that Vince doesn't have influence over, having lost Morgan, and now that person is also in for Rylie. It's just like, it's a lot.
It's interesting because this is one of those situations where you could delude yourself into thinking you're a position and almost manifest that position for yourself. Like if everyone's voting against, half the house is voting against Rylie might be forced to accept Mickey as an ally despite targeting her for the past 3 weeks. So anyways, that's all I got.
I mean, the only reason he targeted her is because he just gets mad at people for no reason.
Wait, last I heard, he wanted to nominate like Kelly, Keanu, and this person because he just doesn't give an F. So like, you got to take it all with a grain of salt.
But now it's Rachel and Ashley and whoever.
Might be Catherine
all
tomorrow.
right.
I don't know.
Well, that is what we have for you then today. I will, of course, be back tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern to update you on everything that happens today on the Big Brother 27 live feeds. It will be day 44, and it could be an important day. There's a lot of work to do. There's a new alliance. There's a potential flip in the works. So the ingredients are there. We'll see if anything big happens. I'll let you know before the vote where it seems to be leaning. Then there's also an episode tonight, of course. So I'll be live on Twitch and YouTube watching tonight's episode. We'll be live after the episode for the podcast, for the recap after the fact. You can also check out my book, Behind the Mirror. You can find me on Patreon talking about Australian Survivor versus the World. I'm doing reaction videos for that over there. And by the way, for the recap tonight, one Taylor Hale will be joining us.
No big
so
deal.
stay tuned for Taylor. Then, oh, look at this. Survivor 49 here in the US has a cast reveal that Rob and Mike will be live at 2 p.m. Eastern to talk through. So make sure you check that out. We've got the slop from last night with Rob and Chappelle for the patrons, and the live shows, of course, in New York and San Francisco for patrons. You can buy tickets still. All right, Cory, what do you got going on?
Not too much. Twitch.tv/Cory Wurtenberger. Basically just stream Big Brother during Big Brother season. So hop on there. And patreon.com/AmeriCory. We just started watching Glee and The Genius season 2. I've watched them. It's America's first time. So if that interests you, check it out.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us here today. And I will see all of you next time.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.